today we're going to talk about punctuation. So we're going to start with talking about sentence structure. Then we're going to talk about using commas with independent clauses, dependent clauses, non-essential elements in a list, with adjectives, with names, other uses of commas, and also what a comma splice is. And we're going to talk about semicolons, quotation marks, and the colon. So, sentence review. A declarative sentence states a fact. It ends with a period. An interrogative sentence asks a question. It ends with a question mark. An exclamatory sentence expresses a strong emotion such as surprise or disbelief. It ends with an exclamation point. An imperative sentence makes a request or gives a command. It usually ends with a period but may end with an exclamation point. We also learned in the sentence structure video that an independent clause is also called the main clause. It is a complete thought and has a subject and a verb. An independent clause can stand on its own as a sentence. This is called a simple sentence. A dependent clause, also known as a subjective clause, cannot stand alone in a sentence because it does not express a complete thought. It is a sentence fragment. A dependent clause depends on the independent clause to be a complete sentence. You also learned that a run-on sentence is two or more independent clauses that are joined only by a comma, no coordinating conjunction, or nothing at all. The comma says, "I think we should take a break for just a second." The period says, "I think we should stop altogether." And the exclamation point says, "I agree with that." And the question mark is asking a question. What are you guys talking about? So here we have commas with independent clauses. So you use a comma between two independent clauses that are joined by a coordinating conjunction. So and, but, for, or, no, nor, so, and yet. So an example of two independent clauses separated by a comma in conjunction is, "The hairdresser did a great job on my hair, comma, coordinating conjunction, she was very nice to me." You can see that "the hairdresser did a great job on my hair" is a complete sentence, and I would be able to put a period at the end of that sentence. And if you look closely, "she was very nice to me" is also a complete sentence. Both clauses have subjects and verbs. Both are complete thoughts. So I could put periods there, but putting a comma with a coordinating conjunction kind of connects the two ideas together. So again, a good way to remember your coordinating conjunctions is by using the acronym FANBOYS: for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Write that down. Commas with dependent clauses. So if a dependent clause is before an independent clause, you will separate the two clauses with a comma. So an example of how you would do this, in the red you'll see "after you finish school" is a dependent clause. It is not a complete thought. It doesn't have, you read it and you think, after you finish school, what? So it's not complete. It does have a subject and a verb, but it is not a complete sentence. It's not a complete thought. So we consider that a dependent clause, and you would set it off with a comma and an independent clause. This will make it complete. If you look closely, "you should look for a job" is a complete thought. It has a subject and a verb, so it is an independent clause. So we have a dependent clause, a comma, and an independent clause. Another example, "if I have time, comma, I will call you later." We have a dependent clause that is relying upon the independent clause to make it a complete sentence. If a dependent clause is after an independent clause, you need to determine if the clause is essential or non-essential to the meaning of the sentence. A non-essential clause will be set off with a comma. You're not going to see this a whole lot in writing. Usually, dependent clauses will be in front of independent clauses. Commas with non-essential elements. What you're going to do is you're going to use commas to set off non-essential elements, a word, a clause, or a phrase that can be removed without changing the meaning of the sentence. So, if you look at the sentence, my aunt, who is 60 years old, cuts hair for a living. Is it essential to have the words who is 60 years old as part of the sentence? If I removed that information, would it still make sense? Would it have the same meaning? And it would. If I read this, my aunt cuts hair for a living, it would still make sense. So, who is 60 years old is non-essential. It's a non-essential element. Commas in a list. Use commas in a list to separate 3 or more items. So if you look here, I have Tammy completed her homework for math, science, and history. There are 3 items in this list, and they are separated with the commas. So you should know that some people will say that you do not have to have a comma before and, which is, usually the last item in your list is going to have and then whatever that last item is. A lot of people will say you don't need the comma there, and that is true. It's just a good practice to get in the habit of putting that comma before and. This is a picture I found on the internet. I like cooking my family and my pets. Oh my goodness, you like cooking your family and your pets? That sounds terrible. This makes you a psycho, right? So it says, use commas, don't be a psycho. Instead, it should say, I like cooking, comma, my family, comma, and my pets. Much better. So commas between adjectives. If you look here, if the word and can be written between 2 adjectives that are describing the same noun, then a comma should be used between the adjectives. If 2 adjectives describing the same noun can be written in reverse order and still make sense, then a comma should be used. So in this example, she is a strong, intelligent woman. Strong and intelligent are adjectives used to describe the woman. And so you have to look at those 2 adjectives and think, I don't know why I'm having a hard time saying that word. You have to look at those 2 adjectives and decide, can you put an and between them? Would it still make sense? She is a strong and intelligent woman. Yes, it does make sense. So you could put a comma there instead of and. Also, if you can reverse the order of the 2 adjectives, then it would be fine as well. So she is a intelligent, strong woman, and that makes sense as well. So you could put a comma between. Commas with nouns. Use a comma with, commas with names. Use a comma with names if you are directly addressing the person. This can get confusing for people. Oh, I thought I had something else on that slide. If you look at this picture, I also found this one on the internet. Let's eat grandma. Ooh, that sounds terrible because we don't want to eat grandma. You need to punctuate. You need to write, let's eat, comma, grandma. You need to set off that direct person. It makes a big difference, doesn't it? So some other uses are to separate numbers when you're writing out numbers. use commas between cities and states, such as Seattle, Washington, commas to set off a complete date. So here you see a lot of commas. I was born on January 24th, 1970, in Seattle, Washington. If I had just written I was born in January 2013, I would not need to, I wouldn't have the, for instance, I would be missing a date in there. So you wouldn't have to have the comma. You wouldn't do January, 2015. You only put the comma if there's a date in there. Sorry, didn't mean to confuse you on that one. Use commas to set off addresses. So here we have an example. My address is 504 Loretto Drive. That's the street, so you put a comma. Elk Grove is the city, comma, and then the state. Use a semicolon to separate two independent clauses instead of using a comma in a conjunction. So we talked about if we have two independent clauses, you can put a comma in a conjunction. That works. But you can also just put a semicolon. So this we use oftentimes if we have two closely related independent clauses that really would read well together if they were kind of connected with this semicolon. An example, I have blonde hair, semicolon, she has brown hair. You should also use a semicolon to separate a series that already has commas in it. This will help to eliminate any confusion. For instance, if I had I will attend seminars in Seattle, Washington, Reno, Nevada, it makes it confusing. You really want to separate the cities and the state by using the comma and then the next item in the list. So you can see here that I will attend seminars in Seattle, Washington, semicolon, Reno, Nevada, semicolon, San Diego, California, semicolon, and Boise, Idaho. It really helps to separate those pieces of information. Correcting a run-on sentence. So we talked about what a run-on sentence is. It is two or more independent clauses that are joined only by a comma. There's no coordinating conjunction or nothing at all. So that makes it a run-on sentence. A lot of people think a run-on sentence is when a sentence is very long, and that's not the case. It's usually when it's punctuated incorrectly. So you have this sentence here, my teacher is wise, I have learned a great deal from him. Now, when you read that there, it's missing punctuation. And there's lots of ways that we could fix this run-on sentence. My teacher is wise, period. I have learned a great deal from him. My teacher is wise, semicolon. I have learned a great deal from him. My teacher is wise, comma, coordinating conjunction. I have learned a great deal from him. And my teacher is wise, semicolon. Moreover, I have learned a great deal from him. Lots of options. So a comma splice occurs when two independent clauses are connected with a comma, no coordinating conjunction. So it's just a comma, and that makes it a comma splice. It's just basically an incorrect use of a comma. So a few options to correct a comma splice is to add the coordinating conjunction after the comma, to replace the comma with a semicolon, or to replace the comma with a period to form two complete sentences. Quotation marks. A lot of people struggle with, where do I put the period or the comma? Do I put it in the quotation marks or outside of the quotation marks? The general rule is that periods and commas should be inside the quotation marks. All other punctuation marks will go outside the quotation marks unless it's part of the quotation. And you want to be careful not to have too many quotation marks. I didn't mean to say quotation marks. I meant to say you want to be careful not to double up on too many punctuation marks. So using the colon, use a colon between two sentences when the second sentence in some way summarizes, restates, or explains the first sentence. There should not be a coordinating conjunction between the two sentences. So, an example, I studied all weekend for one reason, colon, to ace my history exam. I studied all weekend for one reason, comma, that is, to ace my history exam. I was told that if you can use that is when you're, moving forward into your next clause, you could usually put a colon there instead of that is. That's kind of a little trick that might work for you. Using a colon in lists. Use a colon to set off a list of 3 or more items. Sentences with lists often use phrases like the following or as follows. So oftentimes you're going to see, I need you to bring the following items and then, a colon. So please provide us with the following items prior to your interview, colon, resume, references, and cover letter. And again, you see the commas there in the list. And then you also have another option. You can put the colon and then you can list your item either with bullets or with numbers. Now, you don't have to put periods after those items, but it's okay if you do. Other common uses of the colon. We use it after a salutation in a business letter, as you see there, between the hour and the minutes when we write out our time, and between titles and subtitles of books. For instance, The Millionaire Next Door, colon, The Surprising Secrets of America's Wealthy. This is a great example of the power of punctuation. The first sentence here, a woman without her man is nothing. However, when you punctuate it, a woman, colon, without her, comma, man is nothing, period. Keep that in mind when you are doing your punctuation. So in review, we did a lot today. We learned about commas, we learned about semicolons, quotation marks, and the colon. Hope you enjoyed the video.